Good morning from Vietnam, Oak. Thank you so much for spending your evening. So good evening to you, and spend your evening with our audience in the Inside Sharing shows. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you for being so generous and kind to join our show.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me to be a part of your show.
Yeah, Oak. This talk is we're gonna use your stories to inspire people, and so we're gonna travel time together. Since you've been in Vietnam 17 years ago, right? You know our culture a little bit. It's very honor for us if we can have you to introduce a little bit about who you are and the works that you do. Would you please do that?
Sure. So I'm a retired Army officer. I spent 23 years in the United States Army as a combat arms officer, an infantry and armor officer. And then did a lot of time, a lot of that time was in training, teaching. I did a lot of teaching for our Army officers and for the Australian Staff College as well in Canberra. And had three operational deployments. I was in the first Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then I was in Bosnia, and then I was in Kosovo, and did two humanitarian relief operations here in the United States. One for Hurricane Hugo, and one for Hurricane Andrew. Um, so I went deployed to both places for about 90 days and helped with the recovery from the hurricanes. And now I live in Daytona Beach and just got hit by two hurricanes. So it happens. Retired from the Army, ran a food bank for a couple years, the day-to-day operations of the food bank, and then they offered me to come here to Daytona Beach and do recruiting for Army ROTC. And so that's what I currently do. That's my day job right now.
Mm. Well, thanks a lot for serving our country. And this talk we're gonna bring you back in time to understand why you make that choice earlier in your career. All right. So let's travel time. When I was young, I always wanted to become an astronaut.
Ah,
Yeah, jumping in different planets seems really exciting to me. But life did not give me any chance to do that kind of work, right? So, when you were young, what was your dream about your future?
yeah. So I guess my first dreams when I was young. I played baseball, basketball, football all my life,
Mm.
and I always thought I wanted to be a pro athlete. Never had a real chance of that, but that was always a dream. But then about sophomore year in high school, my ninth, 10th grade in high school, I was always the captain of my sports teams. I was president of student government. I was president of my class. So I'd always been in leadership positions, and I figured out I liked it. And so I figured I wanted to be a leader, and no better place to be a leader than in the Army, at least in my opinion, it was. And so I started down that road. Um, got accepted into West Point. Did 2 years there. Didn't graduate from West Point, but and then I finished up. Came home, helped my father run his business for about 18 months, and then finished up in ROTC at Northern Illinois University, where I met my lovely wife, who was also in ROTC. She was an Army nurse for 8 years, and why she married me, I have no idea, but that's 35 years ago. She's stuck with me now. Um, and so finished up there and started my career as an Army officer. And a lot of people would always ask me, so why? My father-in-law said, "Oh, with your ambition and your motivation and your dedication and all that, you could have done very well in the business world and made a lot of money." And he said, "So why did you choose to do the Army?" And I told him, I said, it was really simple for me. My father never finished the fifth grade. My mother never finished the 10th grade. Yet I got to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point. I retired a lieutenant colonel. Nowhere else in the world do I have it.
Mm.
And if I served so that my children, your children, somebody else's children would have the same opportunities I had growing up and the same choices that I made.
Wow, wow, beautiful. So, what did your father say after that?
So my father was not very happy with me going in the military. but he eventually came around, and he realized that not only was it the right thing for me, but I was actually it was good for me, and I was good for it, and I was making a difference in the world. And that's what I tell every one of my lieutenants that we commission out of this program that I'm in. And last year we commissioned 62 brand new second lieutenants for the United States Army. One of the last things I tell every one of them is go out there and make a difference in the world. Make a difference in the lives of the people you lead, in the organization you lead, and eventually, if you get high enough in this great army of ours, maybe you can even make a difference in the world that this country and in the world that we're in.
So imagine 30 plus years ago when you first joined in the army, you wanted to make a difference. What was the difference that you wanted to make at the young Oak at that time?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer. I was lucky in my life. I've had some mentors and some good leaders who have helped me along the way, and every one of them was what I consider a servant leader. They believed that the most important thing for a leader to do is to take care of the people in their organization and to run their organization in a very, I say, what the culture is, to develop a culture in their organization that is based on values, good values, that everybody, no matter what religion you are, no matter where you live, you should want to live good values. And so I wanted to make a difference in the lives of people. I wanted to make sure that I was taking care of them and helping them become the best version of themselves. And I always, when I tell people, young men and women, that's what they should be trying to do, they always come back and say, well, I want my promotion and I want my pay raise and I said, you're going to get it. Oh. If you treat people the right way and you turn them into the best version of themselves and you make sure they trust you and they understand you got their best interest in heart, they're going to do great things for you and your organization, and you will get your raise and you will get your promotion because of how well they do. And you get it for the right reason. Not because you were selfish and you wanted it, but because you helped other people become better people. That's why you got it.
Wow. And the only soldier and army people that we met was the people in the movies, right? And there's a lot of life and death situations that happen in the combat group. So you were deployed in multiple operations. Were you scared back then, though?
No, I don't think I don't know that I ever was scared. I mean, I guess everybody has a little bit of a fear, and if you don't, then I think there's probably something wrong with you. But I don't know that I would say that I was scared. And I think part of that is, one, because I knew why I joined and what I was doing. And I tell all these young men and women that we commission, I said, look, you're joining an organization that you got to understand what you're doing. You're joining an organization where you can as a leader, you can make all the right decisions and you can do everything right, and people might still die. That's just the nature of our business. That's what we do. I mean, and if you can't handle that, go do something else, because that is what the American people pay you for. So I understood that piece of it. And then also the training that I had gone through. I figured I was as well trained as I was going to be to do the things that I was being asked to do. And I always made sure that my soldiers felt that way as well. I mean, they weren't always happy when I kept them there an extra hour or 2 hours to redo something that I didn't think they did well enough. But in the end, when we deployed and they realized that they were trained as well as they were going to be trained, I think they appreciated it at that point.
Wow. So Oak, you've been growing in the military leadership positions, and then you decided to retire. 23 years after 23 years of service, like you said. And why did you decide to leave the organization that you've been servicing for a long time and starting the new chapter?
Because there were a couple of reasons. I think I had gotten to the point that I was about as high as I was going to get, and any other jobs that I was going to get, I just didn't think I was going to be able to have the impact that I was going to have. And I had the opportunity, leaving, to join another organization where I was going to provide service for people who needed it in running the day-to-day operation of the food bank. And the food bank I took over was in Mobile, Alabama, or took over the day-to-day operation. I was second in charge of the food bank. I was the associate director. but I ran the day-to-day operations of the food bank. And it just so happened that food bank, we covered 52 counties along the Gulf Coast of the United States. So in Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And I took over the day-to-day operation just before the Gulf spill, the oil spill in the Gulf, back in 2009, 2010. And so we spent a lot of time helping the people who were affected by that spill. And so I always think that God put me in there for a reason, to help get those people through that hard part of their life. And it was very rewarding to do so. So I think it was at that point that it was time to move on and do something else. And we loved it in Mobile, Alabama. It was a hard decision to leave there, even after the 2 years of being the associate director of the food bank.
Wow. So can you tell me one of the most beautiful memories you had during that time?
Of the food bank?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went down to a place called Bila Battery, and it's really the shrimp boat capital of the United States. I mean, they go out in the Gulf and they get most of the shrimp that Americans eat. And to put it kind of in perspective to you, the majority of the people who live in Bila Battery are Vietnamese origin. And a lot of them work on the shrimp boats, own and work on the shrimp boats, and they also work in the canning factories that a lot of the seafood that they catch is canned and sent out to the rest of the world and packaged as well, if not even canned, but packaged. And so right after the oil spill, we realized that they were going to be in trouble because they weren't even letting the boats leave dock. So I went down there and I had a meeting with a group of people there in the community, and they all came together, and they were all there for the interest of the community, not their own interest, not for the Vietnamese people, not for the American people, not for the African American people, for the white. It was all of the community came together, and with them and me, we figured out how we were going to keep them alive and fed and make sure that they always had food on their table. And I remember that meeting like it was yesterday. I mean, it was a moving meeting.
Wow. That
really touched me and made me understand that that's what this world is about, is helping other people. And I kind of do that as well. Through my years in the Army, I did a lot of that kind of stuff as well. But it was nice to see that nobody forced these people to come to the meeting. Nobody forced them to make concessions and decide what was going to be the best interest of the community, not just their best interest. And it was really uplifting.
Wow, that's rare to see, and if we can experience that, that would be so wonderful to see how people join force together to help one another, right? So it's beautiful. I knew that happened a lot in the army also. So maybe let's travel back in the army. What was the good memories? Do you have one good memory that you want to share with us?
Yeah, probably. I was in Kosovo, and we were doing a peacekeeping operation, and I was holding meetings and calling the people together to kind of try to get them back together. The Albanians, the Serbs, the Gypsies, everybody who was in that country, try to get them back together, and some really bad things had happened, and trying to get them over that, and so they could move on. And I had a meeting. There was we had several meetings to get the economy moving again. There was a quarry in our area that we needed to get running again. There was a food processing plant that we needed to get running again. And so I called everybody together, and it was funny because the food processing plant was owned by a Serb, and the quarry was owned by an Albanian. And of course, they didn't want to hire anybody but their own people. And so I called them all together, and we kind of talked through, and at first they were just adamant, not hiring anybody but Albanians for the quarry and Serbs for and after about a 3-hour meeting, it was pretty intense, finally got them all to agree that that wasn't the right answer. And we got them to the food processing plant hired 10 Albanians and the quarry hired 10 Serbs, and we helped them get both of them up and running again, which they needed to get the economy going again, and to help service the people of that community. I mean, they needed that food processing plant, and they needed jobs in the quarry to help pay for the things that they were going to need to do. So that was a very good good event that I really remember.
And what year was that?
That was I was there from 1999 to 2000, so I spent the millennium right there as we were turning, the Y2K. Everybody thought Y2K was going to end the world. Well, it didn't. And so I was there. That was probably in 2000, right after the first of the year, because we got there in November of late October, early November of 99, and then rolled over into the new year, and that's where I did most of the things that we got done happened in 2000.
So you were around 30s to 40 years old back then.
Yeah, so I was born in 63, so
37. 37,
yeah.
And then you've been handling one of the most difficult negotiation discussion ever in that conversation. So, how did you feel about negotiating with different people with different background, with different religions like that?
Yeah, and they brought their own baggage, and I got it. Again, like I said, I'm a history major, so I understand that region very well. And the first thing I had to overcome was every time I started a meeting, if I was at a Serb meeting, they would tell me everything that the Albanians had done to them over the last 2,000 years. And if I was at an Albanian meeting, it was everything the Serbs had done to them. And finally, I just kind of said, look, I got it. Lots of people did bad things. We got to go from right now moving forward. It doesn't do us any good to live in the past. Nothing good is going to come from that. And we're not going to fix this place if we continue to live in the past. And slowly I got them to understand that. Doesn't mean that they forgot completely what happened, because I got it. Bad things happened, and it's hard to overcome that. But they realized that if they wanted to move forward and they wanted to make life better for them and for their kids, that they had to move forward. And we finally got them to start doing that. And I finally stopped getting a history lesson for the first 15 minutes of every meeting I held.
So that is very, very beautiful, because I just heard from you that you graduate your school from history major, and that pays really, really well in that situations, right? So let's travel back in time again. When you was in university, why did you choose history out of every major that you could choose?
Good question. One of my mentors when I was growing up, I always tell people 3 people really had the influence that turned me into the person that I am today. Number 1, my father. I am who I am because of him. There's no doubt about it. That's good and bad. And then I had my basketball coach, Coach Nitzwicki, who I still stay in touch with today. Was a fantastic man, servant leader, understood that it was about the young men and women, not only about making a good basketball team, but making good humans that were going to make a difference in the world, who were going to be a good, productive member of society. And so he had an influence on me. And then my history instructor, my history teacher in high school, Mr. Schindler, who I still stay in touch with, he had a huge impact on me. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a very good teacher. He was a great human who, again, understood that it was about creating better people, not just getting you through high school. And so when I got to college, I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and history just came natural to me. I loved it, and it was, and so that's what I chose, was history. And I loved history. I love reading about history, and I love learning about other people and why they did things and how they did things, and so it just was a great fit for me.
Wow! So when you met your teacher Schindler, right? His name is Schindler. Yes.
Yeah, so, Mr. Schindler.
Mr. Schindler, Did you ask him? Did you tell him that he was one of the people that inspired you to study in histories and did you tell him that?
Yeah, I did. And when I wrote my book, and I
Hmm.
sent a signed copy to each one of them, to Mr. Schindler and to Coach Nitswicki. And I put in there in the little handwritten note that I did, how important their influence in me was as I was growing up.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. What did they say to you?
They were touched,
Ah,
and that's not why I did it. I did it because I wanted them to know
ah,
that they did make a difference. At least in my life, they made a difference. And
beautiful.
and again, that's a huge part of me right now is I want to make a difference in people's lives. I've been trying that for the last 40 years that I've
Hmm.
been a leader, and so I wanted them to understand that what they did helped me to understand that that's what good leaders do, is make a
Beautiful.
difference in people's lives and really take an interest in people's lives to change people's lives. Because I could have very easily, been like my mother and father, who not only they didn't finish high school, but I did. I'm the only one that ever finished college in my family. So nothing said I had to go to college or that I was going to go to college, but they had a huge impact in that decision that I made.
Wow, wow. That's very powerful statement that you just say because a lot of us undermine our our level of influence on somebody else next to us, right? So if
Oh, it's huge. I
yes,
mean, you never know what kind of influence you are going to have on somebody. That's why you have to approach every one of those opportunities as an opportunity to change somebody's life, because you may be changing somebody's life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's travel to the future a little bit again. So you're at the food bank, and what happened after that? Oh,
So I came here to Daytona Beach, Florida, and I started recruiting for the Army ROTC program. And here in America, there's three ways to get a commission in the United States Army. There's the United States Military Academy at West Point, which most people probably understand.
hmm,
And then there's ROTC, which produces about 75% of the officers for the United States Army.
hmm,
And they're at normal colleges, just 274 colleges out there, uh, in America that run these programs. And then if you count their partner schools, it comes out to about 1,200 schools that you can pick and go to ROTC. And then the last one is OCS, which is for enlisted soldiers to become officers. So they offered me to come here and do the recruiting for the program, and they told me that they wanted to grow the program. And so when I took over the program as the recruiter, there were 165 cadets in the program. We started last year with 388 cadets in the program.
wow.
So in 11 years, we went from 165 to 388. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, I was selected as the recruiter of the year for Army ROTC for Cadet Command. So out of 274 recruiters, I was selected as the recruiter of the year.
Wow. So is that the program that you send people to the university, to the college, and they recruit the students from there, right? When I was
Right. So
yeah.
I do recruiting in two ways. I do recruiting in high schools
Uh-huh.
to bring students into our program as a cadet, and then I go around on my four campuses, and I hold do briefings and have opportunities for people who didn't come in right out of high school who may still want to join to come be a part of the program.
You know what? That was one of the most surprising thing for me when I went to stay, study there, because I saw a lot of people in the uniform sitting in the school, like, and then across the campus, and then starting to hang out the programs and talk to the people about joining the force, right? And we were so amazed by that because it never happened in this part of in my country. Maybe in different countries they might have that program, but in Vietnam we didn't see it. Yeah.
Not very many. I mean, that's really an American thing.
Uh,
What school did you go to?
I went to Seattle when I was in my college and university there. Yes.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah. What a beautiful city.
Uh, my daughter actually in her high school her last year of high school there, so she's gonna go to Europe for next year, University of Washington.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Oak, throughout the years, and you do many great things, right? I want to know how, in what occasion that transformed you that you would like you be doing a speaker, becoming a speaker, right, and an author. Tell us what happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been given, well, I always tell people being an officer in the Army, you got to be able to communicate. That being successful at just about anything in life, you need to be able to communicate. But certainly, if you want to be a leader, you got to be able to communicate. And so, I've been speaking publicly for 35 years. Just never got paid for it. But I, been given Veterans Day speeches and history speeches and different things throughout my career in the Army. Really, my last duty assignment on active duty, and when I was running an Army ROTC program, I was going around talking to high school students and college students and asking them, what they wanted to do in life, what they wanted to be, and they'd tell me what profession they wanted to be, and inevitably somebody would say, and I want to be a leader.
Oh.
And I said, great, world needs more leaders. What does that take? What does it mean? And you get that deer in the headlights look. They had no idea what it meant to be a leader. And they probably wanted to be a leader for the wrong reason. They probably wanted to be a leader, at least at that point in their life, because they wanted the title, they wanted more pay, they wanted better privileges. And let's face it, all those things come generally with being a leader. But if that's why you want to be a leader, go do something else. You're never going to be a good one. So I came up with this presentation that I've been given about what it takes to be a good leader. And I've got about 15 different things that I can talk about. Now, obviously, in a 45-minute presentation, you can't talk about 15 different things. So I tailor it to whatever organization I'm giving it to. And I usually talk about 4 or 5 things in that 45 minutes. Like I talk about communications. I talk about being a servant leader. I talk about building teams, about building a culture and having a vision and a plan. I talk about professional development. I talk about mentoring and coaching. So it just depends on what I can put them together in different ways so that I can talk to whatever organization that wants me to come talk to. And so I was here in Daytona doing my recruiting and still giving that presentation. I still gave it quite a bit. But I was at church one with my wife and I and her mother and 2 people who live in the condo here. We went to church. There was a motivational speaker that was at our church, and he was talking about not only motivational speaking, but also talking about how to help build the Catholic Church back up, get people excited about the Catholic Church. And he was a great motivational speaker. And it was about a 3-hour-long presentation. Now, he didn't talk the entire time. He'd talk for 40 minutes, and we'd have music and do some other things. And then he'd come back and talk for another 40 minutes. And so he talked 3 different times. And each break, I'd go up and talk to him. And I told him, I said, I want to really do this. I want to be a public speaker. And so I kept talking to him. And he said, so, Oak, have you written a book? And I said, no, John, I haven't. I said, I'm thinking about it. And he looked at me and he said, stop thinking about it and do it.
Beautiful.
So I went home that night and I wrote out the outline for the book. And I started writing the next morning. So that was the 16th of February, 2020. And I published the book on the 12th of February, 2021.
Tell us what?
February 12th, 2021. So
1 year.
Less than a year from the time I started writing till the time I published it.
Wow. And what was the speaker name? You still remember?
Jonathan Fanning.
Jonathan Fanning.
Jonathan Fanning, and you can find him on the internet, and I would encourage you to do so. He's a great speaker, great public speaker, great motivational speaker.
Wow. So look at what happened in your life, right? You have a lot of amazing angels that happen in your life, right? The basketball coach that you had, the history teacher, all the leaders that you've been servicing and been interacting with when you were at the U.S. Army, right? And now for your new journey to become a public speaker and an author, then Jonathan happened to appear and push the boundaries. You would say, just do it, right? Don't think about it. But
amazing. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, but from the thinking to the doings, right? Writing is extremely hard. So you must have that idea of writing inside of you for a long time. Otherwise, if
Well,
you,
I had.
yeah,
Absolutely. I thought about writing that book for many years and should have written it a long time ago. I mean, you know, he's absolutely right. I should have stopped thinking about it and just done it. And but it was a little bit easier for me to write that book than for some people who are starting from scratch with an idea, because I've been given that presentation for so many years that I just took that presentation and I put it into book form. I just put it in written form. Now I added a few things and added a few stories and whatever. But for the most part, most of what I put in that book, I had talked about at some point during one of my presentations. And it's funny, because I actually just finished the audio book not too long ago, and I did the reading for it. And the only time that I had a problem was when I was reading along, and it was a spot where the editor had changed just something a little bit, changed the format of the sentence or whatever. And so I'm reading along, and I wanted to do it just like I do when I give my presentation. So it was some of those places in the book, I had to do 4 or 5, 6 takes to get it right, because I just kept wanting to go back to doing it the way I do it when I give my presentation.
so so tell me that what that book is about.
Oh, it's all about leadership. And I always tell people, look, there is no theory in my book. I don't talk about theory whatsoever. I talk about everyday things that every leader, no matter what profession, no matter what level of leadership they are, can use every day to make themselves a better leader, improve their leadership skills and their abilities. And I really, I mean, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the book. I've got 185 reviews on Amazon on the book, and I've had a lot of people call me and write me and talk to me and about the book. And this is what I usually get. I mean, I wrote the book for young men and women, really aspiring leaders, because I wanted them to understand what it takes to be a good leader. And I've gotten lots of feedback tells me I did a good job at that. But the other thing that really makes me proud is I had a 2-star general who read it from the Marine Corps. And he read my book, and he sent me a message, and he said, you know what, Oak, I didn't learn a whole lot of new things from your book. I learned a few new techniques that I could use to do some things. He said, but what I really took out of your book was, as I was reading along, I'd come to a section and I'd say, you know what? I used to do that really well, and I don't do that so well anymore. Maybe I need to dedicate some time and effort to get back to doing that again.
Beautiful.
And so that made me feel really good.
Wow, beautiful. We get to that point later. Okay, so I want to start from the basic first. Earlier you said that when you talk to a lot of people coming to the program, I talked to you about leaderships, and then they have different version of leadership, and some didn't even know what leadership supposed to be meaning, right? So you wrote the book about that. We want to understand what is an Oak definition of good leadership, though.
Yes, absolutely. So again, servant leadership. I always tell people it's not about you, and it's all about you. It's not about the privileges you're going to get, or the title you're going to get, or the better pay you're going to get. That's not what it's about. It is about helping other people become the best version of themselves and doing the right things for them. So there's a couple things in that servant leadership that I really believe in. Number one, selfless service, because it isn't about you. And if you think it is about you, go do something else. Again, you're not going to be a good leader. So selfless service is number one. You got to be selfless service. You must set the example in everything you do every day, because everybody is watching. Anybody who does not believe that the people you're leading are watching everything you do is pretty naive. Wow. So they are watching everything you do. And the third thing that I believe in is that you must do the right thing. Integrity is the utmost. And my father used to tell me, son, nobody can ever take your integrity away from you. You've got to give it away. And so you got to really guard your integrity with all you have, because that's one of the most important things. And the last thing that I really believe leadership is about is trust.
Mm.
You can't, people will not lead somebody they don't trust. You, you can be the leader if people don't trust you, but really you're just a boss. You're a leader by name. You're only a boss. And there's a difference between a boss and a leader.
Mm.
Leaders, people trust. And one of my favorite quotes, Vince Lombardi, who was an American football coach here in the United States, and probably one of the most successful football coaches in the history of American football, he used to have a saying. He said, a team is not a group of people who play together. A team is a group of people who trust each other. And it's the same thing with any team. I don't care what kind of a team it is, whether it's football or a sports team or an organization, a company, whatever it is, you got to have that trust there. And there's a couple ways to start building that trust. And I believe that you have to be where your people are. Nobody wants to follow somebody who leads from behind a desk. Why would you follow somebody like that? You want to follow with somebody who's out there talking to you, getting ideas where you are. So they're learning what you're going through, what you have to do, and maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe they can provide you better resources or more, or some better system to do your job better. Or maybe even you can tell that leader what you need to do your job better. So that's that interaction with that trust. Number two is you have to listen to people. If you as a leader think that communication is you talking and not listening, then you're not a leader. It has to be a two-way street. You got to listen to people. And I always say the best way to do it, two things. Number one, I tell every young leader, every day go out and find one person in your organization and find out something new about them. Not about work, about personal. Their spouse's name, their kid's name. How many kids do they have? What sports do their kids play? What hobbies does that person have? Something new about that person. One person every day, one thing new. And one of the good ways to do that is I had a boss who retired a 3-star general, and he said, Oak, never, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said, I don't care how high up in your organization you get, always go get your own cup of coffee. He said, two things happen when you do that. Number one, they realize you're human and you're no better than they are. You have to go get your coffee just like everybody else. And number two is that along the way, from your office to the coffee pot, stop and talk to everybody along the way and ask them questions and listen to them. He said, and if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get there and get back. So each time you go a different way and you talk to different people.
Wow. See how beautiful his advice is, like go and get your own coffees on the way that you can talk to people and you can interact with people. While a lot of leaders these days have a different road to their office, different elevators to their office, and keep a big distance from, from other people in the organization. That perhaps, create the lack of engagement, lack of trust from the team, right? And the whole world, the word trust is very, very powerful word that employees are looking up in their leaders these days. Because
and I think a lot of that is gone right now, like you said, and I think that's why we have this great resignation that's going on. Is people's tired of it. They're tired of being treated poorly when there's no need for it. You can be a servant leader, take care of your people, and be successful, and everybody's happy.
Yeah. So assuming that my assumption is always like this. I believe in human beings. We want to be nice. We want to be kind. And mistakes. We all make mistakes, right? That we want to make right of it. So if any of our leaders now listening to the conversation, that they want to build a culture of trust again, and you have been in the culture that trust is the core of everything that people do in the army, right? So how can we as leaders to build the baby steps to and rebuild the culture of trust again and hope?
Yeah, I think again, leadership is like you hit it right on the head. Leadership is about people. Plain and simple. It's not about flow charts. It's not about organizations. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about people. So if you want to build the trust with people, you've got to get out and spend time with them. This is how when I take over a new organization in the Army, every 2 years you moved and you've got a new job, sometimes every year. And every time I took over a new job, I tried not to change things right away. Now I got it. If things are being done that are illegal or unsafe or unethical, then you got to change those things. I got it. And I was put in some jobs where I had to do that. That's the whole reason they put me there, was to fix that organization. But most of the times that was not the case. And so what I would do is, for the first month, I would just walk around and talk to people at their location. I wouldn't bring them into my office and talk to them. I would go to their organization and talk to them and see what they needed, what they thought was could be done better, what some of their ideas were. And I use this example. My father's best friend when I was growing up worked at a Chrysler plant where for 38 years he put the fender on whatever vehicle was being made at that plant at that time. So if you were taking over the leadership position there and there was problems with the fender on the vehicle that was being put together, who would you go talk to?
Him.
I hope you would go talk to the guy who's been doing it for 38 years. He probably knew that there was a problem and nobody ever came down to talk to him. Or if they did and he said it, nobody paid any attention to it. So get out there and talk to the people. Spend time where they are. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was a company commander, so I was 30 years old, and I had a company, and we were out at the tank range. So I walked up, and there were 3 privates sitting on top of this tank. And so I grabbed an MRE and I jumped up on there. It was lunchtime. I jumped up there and I sat down and I was eating lunch with them. Same lunch they were eating, same MRE that they were eating. And we started talking. And I just started talking about how basic training was going and how their training was going and how they were being treated and how all those kinds of things. And then I said, so what's your goal here? When your enlistment in the Army is up, are you going to re-enlist? Is your plan to re-enlist? Is it to get out and do something else? What's your plan? And they all told me their plan. And so I started talking about they were asking me questions like kind of you're doing. And I said, here's why I decided to stay in the Army and make it a career and do the things that I'm doing. And funny enough, I don't know, about 3 years ago, one of those young men called me. And they said, it was after I won the recruiting of the year and they saw it somewhere that I had won that. He called me and he said, that day that you were sitting on that tank with me, you don't remember me from Adam. He said, but I remember you very well. You motivated me to do some amazing things. He said, when my enlistment was up, I got out of the Army and I went to college and I went through ROTC to become an officer because I wanted to be just like you. And he did his 20 years in the Army. He retired from the Army. He started a business, and now he's a very successful businessman. And that made me feel good. But that's the kind of things that build the trust.
Yeah.
Just talking to people, spending time with people, being human. Like you said, we're all human. But leadership is about people. It is all about people. And if you don't understand that, you can't be a good leader.
Yeah. And then, that also lead me to one of the leaders that I really admire. But then, spending time with me a lot, but was not really spending time with me. And then, for example, like I don't see her as my boss anymore. I always see her as my mom because, how important she was to me. She is to me, actually. And then she asked me 3 times, about how many children do I have. And each and every time I told her I have 3. Until the last time that she asked me, and I took her aside from the restaurant, and I say, hey, as a boss, you are my boss and also my mom. I need to tell you this. You asked me this question 3 times, and every time that you ask this question again, it hurt me because I feel that you don't even listen to what I answered you. So, having conversation, you say this is good, but having a very, very deep conversation is very important, is a lot more important, right? So thanks for sharing that. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have 2 last questions for you before we end this conversation. Is that okay? If we proceed for 2 more questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, I was amazed by the two generals, the two-star generals that you sent. Mentioned earlier when they wrote to you and they said, the few things that you wrote in your book, they did really well before, and then but they not doing it well anymore, and they need to get back to that, right? So that is a very powerful reflection of the level of thinking, the willingness to learn and make improvement from themselves, and that's really admirable characters. And, in your life, Oak, you think a lot, and my wife and I, we are on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe our thinking capability these days is diminishing, it's not increasing at all. So every chance that we are able to talk to experts like you, we're gonna ask this question: how have you been helping yourself to expand your own ability to think?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. I'm a firm believer that anything in life, but certainly leadership, is not a destination. It's a journey.
Mm.
I mean, you every day, if you think you can't learn something every day, again, go do something else because you're no
Mm.
longer an effective leader.
Mm.
Because we all, I don't care how long you've been doing this stuff, you can always learn something new,
Mm.
always. And you know what? Lots of times you learn it from people that you wouldn't even have thought you learned something from.
Mm.
Sometimes it can be somebody who's the lowest ranking person in your organization, somebody who's brand new who might give you a nugget that you can use to help improve your leadership ability and your leadership skills, and just as a person, help you improve as a person, because that's just as important as being a good leader, as being a good person. And so, a couple ways that I do it. Number one is I love to read, and I
Mm.
love reading books. Not as it kind of surprises people when I tell them that the two best books I've ever read, two of my favorite books. Number one on leadership is John Wooden, who was a college basketball coach
Mm.
here in America, and probably the most success. Not probably, he was the most successful basketball coach in the history of America. I think he had 6 or 7 national titles in a row with 7 or 8 years undefeated.
Yeah.
His team did. Um, and his book on leadership, John Wooden on leadership, is one of the best books that you can read about leadership. And I still pick it up every once in a while and just thumb through a couple, sections here and there, just to pick up something to remind myself, like that two-star jump, remind myself of some things that I got to remember to do and
Mm.
keep doing.
Mm.
And the other one that I really love is because I love autobiographies. I think that's where you really, not only do you learn what somebody did, but you learn why they did it, the thought process they went through to figure out what they were going to do. And one of my favorite books is the autobiography of Lee Iacocca, who was the CEO of Chrysler back in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s, and did a great job. Brought them out of bankruptcy the first
Mm.
time they were in bankruptcy, and it's a great book, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Wow, wow. So reading, and then meeting new people, learning from new people every day, new things every day, right? Wonderful.
Yeah, it
Thanks.
just keep an open mind because you just never know. I mean, again, I had a boss who retired a 4-star general, and he said, "Oak, a good idea is a good idea, whether it comes from a private or a general, and a bad idea is a bad idea, whether it comes from a private or a general." You just never know who's going to give you a good idea, who's going to give you that nugget, and it's up to you to find them and to use those pieces of wisdom that you gain from other people.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, and being open to welcome ideas is not something easy. It is
It isn't.
intention. Yeah, it is intentional things that you need to do every day, right? So, last questions, and this is about the future. So we knew that how you get into the army, you get out of the army, and now you're doing a lot of speaking engagement, and wrote a book, right? So is there anything exciting that you are working on at the moment you want to share with us so we can celebrate with you in advance?
So I do think I have another book in me, and I
Beautiful.
haven't. I've written a rough draft of the outline. I have not started writing the book yet, and I know just tell me to do it. But there are only so many hours in a day, unfortunately. But but I do want to write another book, and that one is about, I call it Secrets to Success, and it talks about goals and how to set goals and how to accomplish goals and how to stay motivated and develop some self-discipline and good habits and just a lot of things like that I've learned over the years, been taught over the years, and has helped me to be a successful person. Um, and so that I think that's there. But really, still at this point in my life, and it's, I can't see a day when it won't be my passion at this point, is to get out and talk to young men and women and as many people as I can about leadership, because that's really I had a guy who worked for me, Master Sergeant David Powell, and I say he worked for me. He was a better leader than I was probably, and he worked for me when we were at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, and we were producing second lieutenants. And one day we were talking about the significance of what we were doing, and Master Sergeant Powell told me, he said, "Boss, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations." And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. But the most powerful part of that quote is that you can take that word nations and you can substitute anything you want for it. Company, organization, hospital, food bank, sports team, doesn't matter. Because every organization in every profession at every level needs good leaders. And so at this point in my life, it is my passion to get out there and help develop that next generation of leaders, because I don't think we're doing a good job right now. And we are going to reap what we're sowing. If we don't do a good job of passing down what it means to be a good leader, then we're going to pay the price as this next generation takes over and has no idea what they're doing.
Wow. Oh, thanks a lot for doing that. Okay, because the world has changed a lot, and whatever that the management and the leadership that practice we've been learning over the past decades, is a lot of that has to be changed. A lot of that has to be updated.
Absolutely.
And yes, and we need to relearn and learn and relearn, unlearn and relearn again. And I wish you to have all the supports that you need, of the good things that are going to come to you, so that you can continue drive that for many more new leaders forward in the future. And I'm not going to say things similar to Jonathan when he pushed you to write the first book, but I'm going to say enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey of writing the second book, because it comes naturally within you. And besides leadership, people need also to enjoy the success in their lives also as a leaders, as an individual. So write that second book and help them to enjoy that journey for themselves also, please.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much for spending your evening with us, and sharing your amazing stories. Please say hello to your wife Kelly and your children on our behalf. All right.
I will. Thank you. And same to you.
Thank you very much. If you ever travel back to Vietnam with your family, let us know, and then we will take you.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. What a beautiful country. It really is.
Okay. Bye bye for now. Thank you.